Well, hello, and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today, man, do I have a fascinating story for you. It's the story about an author named Ryan McGue, who, along with her identical twin sister, was given up for adoption as a baby. Now, due to a health scare a few years back, she needed to track down her birth parents to get a complete family history, and her book, Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging, chronicles that journey. But that's her story to tell, and I'm going to let you hear from Julie in a moment. But my chat with her did remind me of a story from my own childhood. Now, as you dedicated listeners know, I have a twin brother named Jimmy. You've heard his story before. So I've got my twin, Jimmy, my older sister, Mia, and we have an older brother named Greg. And when I was about 13 years old, I found out, big family secret, I found out that my brother Greg was adopted. Now, all of my other siblings knew, except for me. And I'm not really sure why, Michael was kept in the dark, but that was the case. And it all came to a head. One day I was sitting in my grandmother's family room at her apartment in Pompano Beach, and some friends of the family were over, including Auntie Joan. Now, Auntie Joan, not a real aunt, no blood relation, but very close friend of the family, escaped Germany during World War II. So she had a thick German accent. And out of the blue, one day, Auntie Joan looks at me and says, "You know what, Michael? You're very special." Now, I decided not to try and do a German accent there because I would butcher it. But she says, "You're very special." Now, I at 13, did not have what you would call a very high sense of self-esteem. So I'm like, "Why'd you say that, Auntie Joan?" And she's like, "Well, because you're the firstborn male in your family." Now, first of all, let's understand the time period here. This is probably back in the 80s. Auntie Joan, God bless her, was probably born in the 1900-somethings or the 1910s. So yes, this idea of being the firstborn male is kind of an outdated notion. We weren't part of the feudal system. I'm not in line to inherit a whole bunch of land from my parents because I'm the firstborn male. I'm not in line to be king of the Carlin family. But that's what she said. You're the firstborn male. And I'm like, confused because I knew Auntie Joan knew about Greg. I mean, of course she knew about Greg. He wasn't exactly Mr. Social back then, but she knew that my parents had 4 kids. One of them was Greg, and he was 9 years older than me. So after that, she just let it drop, and she just I guess a light bulb went off in her head, like, oh shit, this guy doesn't know. And I didn't think anything more of it. I thought she was just a little kooky. I thought maybe she had some trauma in her past from living in Germany back in those days. So I let it go, but someone didn't let it go. So she must have told my mother about this awkward moment that happened. And that night, my mom and dad and Jimmy and me were driving somewhere. Actually, I know exactly where we're driving. We're driving to Alex Rakowski's house. Now, Alex Rakowski was a kid that we grew up with in Florida. By this time, we had been living in Connecticut for years. And, it was doubtful that this kid remembered us. We remembered him because my brother Jimmy was good friends with him. And he sang this stupid song about Alex Rakowski. I used to go, "Alex Rakowski, do. And I have no idea where that came from. But we were going to see Alex Rakowski and his family. I guess my dad worked with his dad at American Express. So whatever. You don't need to know that. But that's where we were going. And my mother turns to us as my father's driving and says, "There's something we need to tell you. Dad and I had a hard time starting a family, so we adopted Gregory as a baby." And Jimmy's like, "Mom, I already knew that." I'm like, "Jim, how the hell did you know that?" And he's like, "Well, because Mia told me." Like, okay, well, Jim knows, Mia knows, Michael doesn't know. Okay, fine. So now everybody knew. And it was awkward, it was kind of an awkward moment. Everybody knew but me. And, it didn't really impact me, knowing that Greg was adopted. I didn't view him any differently. If anything, it helped me understand, the mystery behind his blue eyes. Neither of my parents had blue eyes. And I know that, yeah, two people with brown eyes can you have a blue-eyed child by passing down a recessive gene. But the fact of the matter is, nobody in my family, cousins, grandparents, aunts, uncles, none of them had blue eyes. But Gregory had the blue daggers. And, I knew enough about biology at that point to know that was a little different. But so it made sense. Okay, Greg's adopted. Fine. Again, it didn't change how I thought about him. He was still my idol. I wanted to be Greg back in those days. Still kind of do, maybe. Part of it was he had great hair. I mean, great hair. It's totally gray now. I mean, it's not even salt and pepper. It's gray. He is a gray-haired man. But it's still a damn fine head of gray hair, I must say. And when I was talking with Julie in our interview, she used a term that really, really kind of slapped me in the face a bit. And that term was rejection. She said that she was hesitant at first to search for her birth parents because she felt a sense of rejection from them. And that word rejection stayed with me. It got me to wonder, how strong of a sense of rejection my brother Greg had felt or must have felt from his birth parents, and how that sense of rejection maybe manifested itself in his own childhood and in those tough teenage years. And even now as an adult, it got me to think about that. I'm thinking about it right now as I free associate this. Greg and I, we only became close in my later teen years. Up until then, Greg was kind of a loner. He was a loner of the family. Growing up in his room, it was on the other side of the house from the rest of us. He rarely ate dinner with us. And I distinctly remember him, whenever we'd have pizza, he'd take 2 slices of pizza, a plate, go right into his room, sit in front of his TV and watch it. A little desk TV. This is kind of back in the early 80s. Very tiny TV. But he had one. That was neat. But that's what he would do. He would kind of be alone a bit. And I remember him, arguing with my dad. They would butt heads a lot. I also remember him being kind of quiet. And it really wasn't until after he graduated college and wound up moving back to Florida for work that I got to know him at all. He was always this mystery guy. But when we'd visit, we'd go down. He actually wound up living with my grandmother while he was working for American Express down in Florida. And he would take me and Jimmy to the movies. He actually taught us a very invaluable skill, which is how to sneak alcohol into a movie theater. And the key, if you're wondering, is using a Ziploc bag. But that's a story for another time. I'll tell you the story about how we saw Hook with Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman and Julia Roberts, completely off our rockers because Greg smuggled in some, I think it was like banana flavored rum. But so we got to know him a little bit then, but I really only got to know him after he opened up his wine store. So he wound up leaving that job at American Express and he moved back north. He followed his dream to open up a wine store. He always wanted to be in the wine business. That's what he did. And I wound up working for him, during the summers from college and in winters, Christmas and all that. And we became very close, Greg and I. And it was funny, kind of ironic, I guess. Customers would come in and say how much we look like each other. And it's funny, obviously we're not blood related, but the guy who I should resemble, my twin brother, he and I look nothing alike. But Greg and I, we don't just look alike. We have many of the same mannerisms. And it's probably me trying to be him in some way. I should probably analyze that a little bit. Like, why do I want to be like my older brother? But anyways, as I wrap up this intro, and I know it's going on long, but as I wrap up, I'll admit that going into this episode, I thought my chat with Julie was, just going to give me a really powerful story to share with all of you. And it certainly has, but it's also given me something much more. It's given me a newfound appreciation for all that my brother Greg has gone through in his life. It's given me a different lens to see his world through. And for that, I am very grateful. So without further interruption, here's my chat with author Julie Ryan McGue.
I thought I was fraternal, and then all of a sudden the DNA test came back. So big surprise.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join me. We'll kind of dig right in because I am very curious to know about your story and kind of what prompted you to write this memoir. But first, let's just get to know each other a little bit better. So tell me, where are you sitting right now? Like, where geographically are you?
I'm sitting in Sarasota, Florida. I have a daughter and son-in-law and two grandsons that live here. So my husband and I started coming down here about 3-4 years ago. And when you compare that to Michigan City, Indiana, and Chicago, it wasn't a hard call.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually from Florida. I was born in a town called Plantation, and I now I live in Connecticut, but I've been all over the. I travel all over the place because I actually interview people for a living, and pre-COVID, I used to do all this kind of work in person, and so I've been to Michigan and I've been to Indiana and I've been to both places in the winter, and I think you're in the right spot right now.
Yeah, well, especially this week anyway. Chicago really got hit hard with some snow. So
yeah.
The only thing about living in Florida is you get a lot of visitors, and that means you have to be very protective with your time. Yeah. And if you're a budding author and trying to launch a book, you've got to be a little selfish.
You do. Yeah, you definitely have to be a little. Well, let's talk about that. So when did you get bit by the writing bug? I mean, I assume it was before you started writing this memoir.
I've always done writing, but not professionally, and kept a lot of journals going through adolescence, and which I actually tapped into when I was writing this book. Did a lot of writing in college. Had a professor that said, you've got to change majors. You need to be an English major, and she didn't convince me. I ended up finishing my psych degree and then went to business school and have an MBA. So the marketing part that I got in graduate school is really coming in useful as a writer.
What do you think drove you to psychology? I was a psychology major too. So I'm just curious, what drove you to that?
Well, like every big Irish Catholic family, there was a lot of dysfunction in our family. And I think trying to understand them, and myself being a twin and also being adopted, psychology was like, yeah, I have to understand this better. I want to understand personalities and family dynamics. I also had a younger sister, not a biological sister, but who passed away when I was a teenager, and our family got messed up there for a while. So that drove me to study psychology.
Was there a particular subfield of psychology that you were more interested in than the others?
The personality piece of it. Yeah. I went to Rat Lab. Did you have a Rat Lab that you had to study bar pressing and all of that?
We definitely had labs that involved mice, but I don't remember. I mean, I remember in learning and cognition, maybe doing some work with animals, but I don't remember that in personality. But I do remember, I'll tell you, one of my favorite professors who I wound up doing my undergraduate research with was my Psych 243 professor, who was Evie Becker-Lawson, and she was my personality professor. And,
cool. One of the cool things that happened to my sister and I when we were at Indiana was we participated in Dr. Rose's Twin Studies program, and we did personality inventories, physical testing, questionnaires. They observed us. And what was fascinating, after 4 years of being involved in this program, they gave us this big, long report. And at the end, the researcher said, everything points to the fact that the two of you could be considered identical twins. And the sisters at the orphanage that where my parents adopted us from had told them that we were fraternal. So it left a lot of questions open. And once DNA, was really reliable, we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's see where this goes. And so that was one of the big surprises in the adoption search, but also another surprise in the book that I share.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give too much away about the book, because I'm sure you want to keep some things a secret. But
yeah.
But
well, you look at the cover of the book, and it's not too hard to see. These girls are not fraternal.
Well, tell me, talk to me a little bit about, your drive to write this book and the backstory there. So I know it starts with a health scare.
Yeah, it starts with a health scare. And I kept running into all these roadblocks. My sister's supporting me. My mom and dad are a little, maybe yes, maybe no. And all these roadblocks were coming up, and we just kept trying one thing after another. DNA analysis was not that reliable. We didn't get a lot of hits on the reports. Plus, we didn't know our birth parents' names, so it was impossible to figure out what direction. And we ended up using a whole slew of people to figure it out. A judge, an adoption agency. We had a social worker researching. And it just took so many ups and downs that people would say, you've got to write this. This is ridiculous. And then there's some surprises that happen towards the end of the book that I realized I have to keep putting this on paper and put it out there. So the big decision was, do I write this as a novel and protect everybody's identities and protect pieces of the story? Or do I write this as memoir? And I was heavily involved with a post-adoption support group at Catholic Charities at the time. And that's a very painful process to sit through. Those sessions were exhausting. And I thought, I really owe this to my cohort to put this story out the way it unfolded, not make it fiction. There was a lot of things I didn't put in the book that I tried to protect people's privacy, changed a couple of names, and I felt like I needed to tell the story the way it unfolded and put it out there as an adoptee's search for truth.
When did you learn that you were adopted? Is it something that you always knew from the time you were very little, or was it a secret? Or tell me a little bit about that.
That's a great question, and I get asked that a lot. And to be honest with you, I do a lot of soul searching about it. I always knew. My parents must have told us really young. I can see that they probably sat both of us down and read us a book or something. They were really good parents. And so we always knew. It wasn't a surprise. And every so often they would do a little checking in. We'd all go into the living room after dinner and they'd say, if you really want to look for your birth parents or parts of your story, will help you whenever you choose to do that. So I felt very supported, and it wasn't a surprise. Plus, as you know, because you're a twin, I had my sister. So the whole idea of searching for all these people that put me into a different family, I was like, I had that rejection already. I think I'll stick with this family. They're awesome. And my sister and I are the bestest of friends. Yeah. And that's part of the story is having that support system built in to a really complicated process.
You just used the term rejection there, and I want to dig into that a little bit if you're comfortable doing so.
Sure.
When did that word, with regards to your family situation, when did that word enter your mind that you felt rejected?
I think I always wondered, and that wonder wasn't, I didn't call it rejection, but, you're laying in bed at night and you're thinking about things, and it's like, why were we not kept with our first family? Why were we placed for adoption? So there is rejection in that. I think when I really started researching it, I realized, wow, there's more to this trauma. It's experts call it adoption trauma. This loss of your identity from your family of origin, and in the case of closed adoption, which was very popular all the way up until the 1980s, there was no exchange of information. My parents were told we were fraternal twins, and that was about it. So that piece of it was, I think, part of the rejection, that the state of Illinois and the court system wouldn't allow us to find anything out. And then when the laws changed, I started on the path of looking and researching, and there was rejection in that process.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away the pieces of the book, but to be placed for adoption is a big question. Is why? Was it because there were two of us, too many kids to raise, or was it because of some other reason? As a kid, you think about, well, it must be something I did or something about me, and then as an adult, you realize, well, it's about them. Certainly, it was their situation that caused this to happen, and then you want to know why. What was the situation? And I learned all of that.
Yeah, so I'll share with you my older brother, Greg. There's 9 years difference between me and my twin brother and our older brother. He was adopted. So my parents had a hard time conceiving, and I mean, gosh, I'm 46, so he's 55. I had to do that math. I carry the two. No, math is not my strong suit. But it was a family secret for us. Like, I didn't know.
Did he know?
He knew. My mother told him from the time he was a baby, for the time he could understand. Anyway, I know she had a book that she kind of walked him through. And we're same situation. So Catholic family, the old Italian-Irish combo plate. Yeah. And but I didn't know. Now I have an older sister. She's 7 years our senior. She knew, and it turned out my twin brother knew. And I was the one who was I was kept in the dark. And one day we were down in Florida visiting my grandmother, and we had some friends of the family over, and Auntie Joan, who wasn't an aunt, but, close enough. Mm-hmm. She said,
Calabash relative.
Exactly. She said, Michael, you're very special. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't feel special. She said, well, you're the firstborn son. And in our twin group, I was born before my brother, which is something I have held over his head his entire life.
Me too. That's me.
That 1 minute, those 60 seconds, huge.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're the firstborn male. I'm like, no, Greg was the firstborn male. And then like a light bulb went off in her head saying, oh, he doesn't know. So then she must have let it slip to my mother that we had this conversation. And in the car, we were going in the car somewhere. And my mother said, hey, there's something I have to tell you. I think I was 13 years old at the time. I said, what? Wow. She's like, well, your brother Greg was adopted. And I look over at my brother Jim, my twin, and I'm like, did you know this? He's like, yeah, I knew. And I'm like, am I the only one who didn't know this? Like, I don't know why. And Greg and I have been, I mean, in many ways, he and I are closer than my twin brother and I. That's just the way things kind of worked out as we grew up. But it was interesting. It was interesting that it was a secret. Was it a secret? I know you mentioned having a sister who has since passed, but was it a family secret at all for you guys, or was it always
No, but I think the birth order has a lot to do with it. So like your parents, mine had trouble having a family. They adopted my sister and I, and then 2 years later, they adopted again through Catholic Charities, my brother. And then all of a sudden the floodgates opened and they had 3 more kids.
Wow.
And a couple miscarriages thrown in there. So it was never a secret. But, when you have 2 older sisters who are very bossy, we were like a wall. There was no messing around with us, or no teasing anyway. And certainly with my brother that was 2 years younger, he was kind of a tough guy. So the younger kids looked up to us, and there was no messing around with the older sisters.
There you go. There you go. Did once you, and again, don't give away anything in the book because I want to read it. But once I assume you did wind up tracking down your birth parents. I'm just curious if you're comfortable sharing what that initial, feeling was like. Again, I know that there's a story behind how you did it and how you tracked them down, which I don't want to give away. But if you could paint a picture of what that first interaction was like, I'd love to hear it.
Well, finding my birth mother had its own little life cycle, but the day that we actually met her was much like that anticipation on Christmas morning where the gifts are they're right down there, and you're so excited to go down the stairs and see what Santa left under the tree that you're beside yourself. And that was what it was like. It was a 5-decade wondering and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then there it was. And it was, everything you wanted it to be. It's like Santa left everything under the tree. So it was spectacular. And we are still very connected, which is great. One of those adoption reunion stories with happy endings for the most part, which is another reason why I wanted to write the story. Was so many stories don't turn out well, and mine certainly had a couple of hiccups that I would love to go back and fix, but not to be the case. But it's a good story. It's a happy story.
How, if at all, did it change or impact the relationship you have with your adopted family, your adopted parents, and even siblings? Did you find that the relationship changed at all? Was it compromised or strengthened? Or I'm just really curious about that.
I go through a lot of things with my adoptive mom in the course of the book, and we weathered through them as best as we could. With the foundation of love. I mean, I love my parents, and I'll get a little emotional here, but we weathered through that whole scenario because we had a good foundation. And we talk about my book, and there's some scenes in the book that maybe she would prefer that were not in there, but as she said to me, you told the story you wanted to tell.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of you. So we're good. We're all good.
That's great. That's great to hear. So talk to me about the writing process, because a lot of the listeners of this particular show are authors. I mean, I profile authors on the show, and many are aspiring authors. They want to learn about the writing process, the publishing process, helpful hints in terms of marketing and all the real hard work when it comes to getting a book out there. I always think that writing is sometimes the easy part, and it's everything else that's challenging. But what was your kind of writing journey here in terms of once you started? What was the process like for you, Julie?
Well, because it was before COVID, when I started my process, I was taking in-person classes at University of Chicago. My family is all over the place, so I was doing a lot of traveling. And then I started looking for online classes to do. And I came across Brooke Warner, who is the publisher. She writes press. And Linda Joy Myers, who's the president of the National Association of Memoir Writers. And they have a wonderful class called Write Your Memoir in 6 months. I took it twice to finish my book and developed a really great relationship with Brooke Warner and decided, I'm in a hurry to get this out. I'm an older writer. I tried query letter for an agent. It didn't go well. And I knew Brooke. So I just said, you know what? I love this hybrid publishing model. You have control over your book cover, the title, the publicity. it comes at a cost, but you're handheld and you have a cohort of authors that you it's like a graduating class. You go through the process with 40 other writers each season. And so I went down that route and I could not be happier. It's been a great experience. I love the book cover and I love the title. And I've got some really great friends, and everything's virtual right now, which is kind of a bummer when you want to do a book signing or something like that. But eventually, maybe by next summer, we'll be able to do that. Yeah. So I highly recommend people investigating everything that appeals to them, and then you can make a informed decision. I didn't want to self-publish. That seemed like way too much work. I was too much of a newbie. And I also didn't want to wait forever and a day for traditional publishing. So one of the choices I did make, too, after I signed up with She Writes Press, was to do the audiobook right away. So the audiobook will come out next spring at the same time as the paper book. And that was a whole nother decision. Do you read it yourself because it's a memoir, or you hire talent? And I just didn't think people would appreciate my Midwest accent. So I ended up hiring an actress, and she does a great job with all the voices in the book. And when we had to proof it, my husband and I were driving down from Chicago to Florida, and we listened to it through the drive, and he hadn't read the whole book. He'd read chapters that I'd given him, and he had tears in his eyes. He said, "She's just so good. This is such a good book." So a lot of decisions for authors to make, one step at a time. And there's so many great classes to take, memoir classes in particular, that people can sign up for.
Yeah, I've tried doing an audiobook for some of my work. And after the second chapter, I'm like, you know what? I need a quieter studio. I need a producer. I need a lot, and just the editing alone. So I think the decision to hire an actress is a smart one. I wound up hiring a voice actor for one of my books, and he nailed it so well. He really did such a great job with it. There's no way I could have done it better. So I will continue to do that. You went hybrid, a hybrid approach. What did you learn, if anything, about yourself during this process? I mean, obviously it's a memoir, so you uncovered a lot. I'm sure you uncovered a lot about, yourself and your family, but what are some of the bigger takeaways you have about yourself just from this process?
The first realization I had when I was writing the book and editing it with my editor was the resilience. I didn't realize that I was somebody that could get slapped on both cheeks and fall down and get back up again. Maybe that was what my upbringing taught me, was just get back out there. But certainly I fell back onto that quality as I was going through the adoption search and reunion, and then also writing it. Was like, okay, this chapter's not working, throw it away. Just start over. The other thing that happened as a course of writing the book was realizing that I had this immense capacity to accept a situation that wasn't great and forgive, people that didn't come through for me or didn't do what I expected them to do. So those realizations come out in the book, I hope.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah.
What's next for you? I think you mentioned having a novel that you had started at one point.
I still have that novel, and I'm going to go back to it because it's a really great premise. It's about a confidential intermediary and all the cases that she handles for adoptees and people coming out of foster care. So it's pretty along the way, but two big questions came out as a course of writing this book. Was, why did you wait so long to research your adoption? And what was it like to grow up as a twin and an adoptee? So I've started another memoir that deals with both of those questions. And much like the first book, my twin sister and I are the main characters, and secrets and sisterhood and all sorts of family dynamics, which, as you know, our family is so entertaining. And isn't it Anne Lamott that says if people didn't act so badly, you wouldn't have to write about them?
That's a great quote. Is your sister, your twin sister, with you in Sarasota, or is she? Where does she live?
Well, we just had a big birthday, so she was down here visiting, but she lives in Michigan City, Indiana. I don't know how it works out this way, but we always end up about 10 minutes away from each other wherever we go. So she lives about a mile from my house in Indiana, and she has 2 kids. I have 4 kids, and our sons call each other the brother from the other mother. I mean, they're really, really close.
That's
the kids.
Nice.
So,
that's
nice.
It's
a lot of fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, my twin brother, he had a little 17-year detour from our family due to a marital situation. I'll be kind and say it was not ideal. And I
have a brother like that too, unfortunately.
It's so hard. It's so hard. I mean, we have him back now. I like to say that we have him back now, and we've been making up for a lot of lost time. But there's a period of time where he was not really involved with the family at all, and kind of not allowed to be involved with the family. But it's nice to have him back. I mean, he and I, funny, we were the best of friends growing up, and it was a very difficult period. He actually just wrote a memoir. That I've been helping him with about his time suffering with anxiety and depression and all that stuff. But this is your story, not his. What in terms of publicity, because that's another thing that comes up with the people who listen to this. Obviously you found your way to me. Was that a service of your publisher, or is that something that you outsourced as well, Julie?
I have a publicist, and she helped me find you, although I was doing a lot of podcast research on my own. I like to think that my marketing background probably helps me with this is fun for me to get the book out there and figure out who's the best listeners for it. And the publicist helps a lot too. And the publicity in general is interesting because we share a lot of information in our She Writes Press group. It seems like you can put a budget to it and find the right publicist, and the events and activities fall in line based on the price. I end up doing a lot myself. I have, as I mentioned, I have family all over the place. A daughter in New Jersey, a daughter in DC, my son's in Chicago, and then the daughter down here, and then lots of nieces and nephews sprinkled all over. So I'm drawing on all those people to kind of help with this grassroots effort too. Book clubs and events and bookshops. So it's fun. I love books, and I've been a reader since forever. My sister and I used to get on our bikes, and our big outing, the only time we could cross the busy street was to go to the library. So we were at the library all the time, and then we made little side trips to the candy shop and other little places too. So I was really proud of my library card, and big Nancy Drew fan. Tried not to have, overdue fines because that came out of my allowance. So.
Very good. Well, let me know when is the book coming out? When is your launch date?
Launch date is May 11th. So that date is right after Mother's Day. And for any listeners out there that are adopted, Birth Mother's Day is the day before Mother's Day. So we tried to hit both dates with the launch date.
Very good. Now, is there a place where people can go to pre-order the book right now so they don't have to wait to buy until Mother's Day or pre-Mother's Day?
The book's available wherever books are sold to pre-order. I'll give a big plug to my indie people and the bookshop.org anybody can go on bookshop.org and their local bookseller will order the book. It's also available on Amazon and IndieBound, and Target even has it. I mean, wherever books are sold.
Very good. Very good. And any parting thoughts you'd like the Uncorking a Story audience to know, Julie?
Keep writing about your story, and you don't have to figure all of it out all at once. There's something magical that happens when you start putting a pen to paper or your fingers on the keyboard. Stuff comes out that you didn't even know you were thinking. And I like to think that if I take a good walk and go back to the computer, whatever was not working before is working now. So everybody can write a book. Everybody's got a book in them. And certainly COVID has taught us we have more time to do things that we were procrastinating to do before.
Almost it sounds like you're speaking to the power of free association when you're in front of that keyboard.
Yeah, it's just astounding to me what those little inner voices come out. Some of them are not nice, but some of them are, they've been trying to get out for a while.
All right. Very good. Well, Julie, thank you so much for talking to me. I appreciate it. And best of luck with the book.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, there you have it. My interview with Julie McGue about her book, her fantastic book, Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging. Now, that book will be available for purchase, available for sale on May 11th. But don't wait. You don't have to wait till then. You can buy it now. You can pre-order it. You can pre-order it wherever books are sold online. We're going to recommend, though, that you pre-order it from bookshop.org, and that'll help out a local bookshop in your area, because every purchase from bookshop.org actually gives a little something back to local bookstops. So how about that? Do good by buying the book, and do good by buying it from bookshop.org. Now, if you want to learn more about me, and if you want to learn more about some of the other guests we've had on Uncorking a Story, you can visit uncorkingastory.com. How easy is that? Uncorkingastory.com. You can listen to interviews with other authors, as well as some of my personal reflections in the open mic column, the open mic blog. So there you have it, uncorkingastory.com. Hey, big news. I've got a new book coming out. Isn't that exciting? The Ruin of Souls will be out March 16th. So set your calendars. You can pre-order that now. But set your calendars. March 16th for The Ruin of Souls. It's a good one. It's a great one. I gotta do a better job at selling myself. It's a great book. You're going to love it. Money back guarantee. If you don't like it, my high school senior year English teacher will refund your money. How's that sound? So for all the hardworking men and women here at Uncorking a Story, this is Mike Carlin saying thank you for listening, and we'll be back with an episode early next week.